You finally get a day off. Nothing scheduled, no obligations, nobody needing anything from you. And instead of actually resting, you spend the first hour reorganizing something that didn't need reorganizing. Then you check your phone. Then you find a small task that technically could wait until Monday, but somehow can't. And at some point in the afternoon, you're sitting on the couch, feeling vaguely guilty about sitting on the couch, with this low-level hum underneath everything that you can't quite name and can't quite turn off. If you've been told you just need to learn how to relax, I'd like to suggest that advice completely misses the point. Because for a specific type of person, the inability to fully power down isn't laziness in reverse. It isn't poor time management. It isn't even anxiety in the clinical sense, though it can look identical from the outside. It's a nervous system that was trained very early that staying alert was the job, and a nervous system that was trained to stay alert doesn't take weekends. So let's talk about what's actually happening underneath the restlessness, because this one runs deeper than most people realize. Your autonomic nervous system has two primary modes. The one most people know is fight or flight, the full activation state, heart rate up, muscles ready, attention narrowed to the threat. The one that gets less attention is the parasympathetic state, the rest and digest mode, the one where your body actually repairs itself, consolidates memory, processes emotion, the one where rest actually happens. What most people don't know is that moving into that second state isn't passive. It isn't just what happens when nothing stressful is going on. It requires your nervous system to actively signal that the coast is clear, that it's safe to let the guard down. And here's where this gets interesting. For some people, that signal never fully fires. Researchers studying what's called autonomic dysregulation have found that individuals who grew up in unpredictable or emotionally inconsistent environments show measurably different baseline nervous system activity as adults, not just when something stressful is happening. At rest, on a Tuesday afternoon with nothing wrong, their baseline is running hotter than it should be, like a car engine idling at the wrong RPM, burning fuel that isn't going anywhere. Stephen Porges, a neuroscientist at Indiana University, spent decades developing what he called polyvagal theory, a framework that maps how the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, regulates our movement between states of safety, mobilization, and shutdown. What his research pointed to was something quietly significant. The capacity for genuine rest isn't a personality trait. It's a physiological skill. And like any skill, it develops, or it doesn't, depending on what the environment around you taught your nervous system to expect. A child who grows up in an environment where calm reliably follows tension learns, at the level of the body, that it's safe to exhale, that the alert state is temporary, that rest is a place you can actually get to and stay in for a while. A child who grows up in an environment where the calm might just be the pause before the next unpredictable thing, where the quiet felt more like waiting than actually resting, that child's nervous system starts filing something away. Not a thought, not a belief, a setting. Vigilance as default, stillness as suspicious. Fast forward 2 or 3 decades, and that child is now an adult who genuinely cannot explain why they feel vaguely on edge on a Sunday morning with nothing wrong. They'll tell you they're a worrier. They'll tell you they just have a lot going on. They'll tell you they're not good at switching off. What they won't tell you, because they don't know, is that their body has been running the same protective protocol it wrote sometime before they were 7. And here's the part that tends to land a little harder. The restlessness doesn't feel like fear. That's what makes it so hard to catch. It feels like productivity. It feels like conscientiousness. It feels, honestly, like just being a responsible adult who takes things seriously. The person who can't sit still is praised for their work ethic. The person who checks their phone every 20 minutes is called dedicated. The person whose mind won't quiet down is told they're just ambitious. Nobody tells them that what they're describing is a nervous system that never got the memo that the emergency is over. There's a concept in trauma research called hypervigilance, which sounds clinical and extreme, but in practice often looks like this: a low-level, near-constant scanning of the environment for what might need managing. It doesn't require anything dramatic in your history to develop. You don't need a case file or a diagnosis. It can come from growing up with a parent whose mood was unpredictable, from a home that was mostly fine but occasionally wasn't. And the problem was, you never quite knew which one today would be. From being the kid who picked up on the tension before anyone said anything, who learned to read rooms before they learned to read books. From any environment where staying alert was functionally smarter than trusting the calm. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between a threat that happened once and a threat that might happen again. It updates its priors and it keeps them updated forever, unless something actively interrupts the process. Which explains why rest feels like work for these people. Not metaphorically, neurologically. Shifting from a high alert baseline into genuine parasympathetic rest requires overriding a system that has years of evidence suggesting that letting go is not the move. Meditation feels impossible. Long baths feel like wasted time. Holidays feel vaguely stressful until the last day, when there's finally no time left to enjoy them. Lying on the couch without a podcast playing and something halfway productive nearby feels not relaxing, but faintly wrong, like forgetting something important that you can't quite name. And here's what makes this particularly interesting from a neuroscience standpoint. The brain structures most involved in this, the amygdala, the anterior insula, the prefrontal cortex, are the same ones involved in threat detection and emotional regulation. When your threat detection system is calibrated high, it doesn't just affect how you respond to actual threats, it affects the entire filter through which you experience your life. Ambiguous situations read as dangerous. Silence reads as ominous. Other people's neutral expressions read as subtly disapproving. The whole world gets turned up a couple of notches louder than it actually is. A 2018 study published in Psychophysiology found that adults with higher scores on measures of early adversity showed significantly elevated resting heart rate variability patterns, a physiological marker of how flexibly the nervous system can move between states, even in conditions designed to be completely calm and non-threatening. The body was still braced, in a room with nothing happening. Because the body doesn't run on what's in the room right now, it runs on its entire history of what rooms have meant. Quick thing worth saying here, because this gets conflated constantly. This isn't the same as being an anxious person in the everyday sense. Plenty of people who experience this aren't anxious in social situations, aren't catastrophizing, aren't particularly worried about the future. They can seem completely calm on the outside, composed, even steady. The person everyone comes to in a crisis, because someone in a permanent, low-grade alert state is genuinely excellent in an actual emergency. The adrenaline finally matches the setting. For one brief window, the internal experience and the external reality line up. That's its own kind of telling. So what do you actually do with this? And I want to be careful here, because the instinct for a lot of people is to immediately turn this into a project, a protocol, a list of things to fix, which is a very on-brand response for someone whose nervous system treats stillness as a problem to solve. The research doesn't point toward aggressive intervention. It points towards something slower and less satisfying. Repetition of safety. Not thinking your way into feeling safe, not telling yourself to relax, but accumulating enough repeated experiences of rest followed by nothing bad happening that the nervous system slowly, reluctantly starts to update its model. That looks different for everyone. For some people, it's physical, slow movement, breath work, anything that directly speaks to the vagus nerve and gives the body a different data point. For some people, it's relational, specific people in whose presence the background hum actually quiets, and paying attention to who those people are. For some people, it's just learning to recognize the restlessness as old information rather than current instructions. Not fighting it, not obeying it, just noticing it came from somewhere, and that somewhere isn't here. The goal isn't to become someone who finds rest effortless. For some nervous systems, that ship has sailed, and pretending otherwise is just another way to feel like you're failing at something. The goal is to build enough familiarity with what actual rest feels like that you can find it sometimes, even imperfectly, even briefly. Because the thing the restless person rarely hears, and probably needs to, is that the vigilance made sense. In the environment where it was built, it was genuinely useful. A small person in an unpredictable situation who stayed alert, who kept scanning, who never fully let the guard down, that person was being smart. The nervous system built exactly the right tool for the world it was handed. It just didn't get the update that the world changed. And that's not a character flaw, that's not weakness. That's just an old system still doing its job in a room where the job finished a long time ago. If any of this explains something you felt but never quite had the words for, drop it in the comments, even one line, because that kind of recognition, seeing your own private experience reflected back accurately, is sometimes the first moment the nervous system actually exhales.